Thank you very much. Apparently we all have to be transparent about our age these days. So I'm 62 and a half, quite happily 62 and a half, and I have two daughters who are in their 30s. I've never been invited to such a fun birthday party. 4.5 billion years, oh yes, how fantastic is that? But let's remember that the task that we have in front of us is actually not to save the planet. She's actually been here a few years before we decided to come. What we're actually trying to protect is that very, very short sweet spot that is more or less only 6,000 of those years, during which civilization as we know it has been here. That is what we're trying to protect, because if we decide to be stupid and irresponsible and have to leave, she will continue without us in a very changed form, but she will continue without us. So that is the task at hand as we celebrate her birthday, and how wonderful that we're doing this just a few minutes before the release of Our Planet Tomorrow. Is tomorrow Thursday in this country? Okay. Sorry, it's one of those. So tomorrow, how fantastic that the release of Our Planet, narrated by the one and only Sir David Attenborough, who I think his voice speaks for all of us in our love for the planet. Anyway, tonight I would like to speak four things very quickly. First, urgency. Second, outrage. Third, progress. And fourth, yes, optimism. So to urgency, I actually now realize that I need a piece of paper. Does anybody have paper these days? Nobody has paper because we all do this. Thank you. Can I use it and then return it in a different form? Thank you. Urgency. So to those who say, so how fast do we have to act? Oh, well, swallow the alarm clock, okay? Really, really fast. So here is the best way that I can explain how fast we have to act, certainly on decarbonizing, which is reducing emissions. And this very scientific demonstration was done by my very favorite climate scientist. So have this paper be, which should be much larger, as big as the screen, 40 gigatons of CO2 that we are collectively, the whole planet, putting up into my boss, the atmosphere, every single year. Now, here is the task at hand. By next year, we have to put ourselves in the position of taking those 40 and being able to half it to 20 gigatons in 10 years. If we're not able to do that, we are completely off track and unable to do the next two steps which we have to do, which is over the 10 years after that, go from 20 to 10, and then from 10 to 5 gigatons by 2050. Now, you will realize that that is actually exponential and not linear. Well, humanity has never done that. And that's a good thing, because how boring would it be if we now have to do, again, the same thing that we've been doing for 1,000 years, right? This is a totally new task. But the task is so important that unless we're able to comply with that task, everything that we know as the SDGs, sustainability, that whole thing is gone. Because decarbonizing and actually getting the climate task done is the portal through which we open up the possibility of sustainability to the entire world. So no pressure, but remember what the urgency is. So that's to that piece. Now, to my second piece. It's actually quite ironic that we are today living in the best world we've ever had. Look at poverty levels, much better than they were 20, 30 years ago. Look at education, in particular education of girls, much better than it was 20, 30 years ago. In fact, much better than it was 10 years ago. Look at mortality rates, female mortality rates, infant mortality rates, much better than it was. Look at deaths from war. Much, much better than it was before. Look at institutional slavery, much better than it was, and the list goes on. So isn't that ironic that at the moment in history, 4.5 billion or 6,000, depending on what you want to take as your time reference, at the point in history in which we are at the best we ever were, we're risking it all. We are risking it all if we're not able to stay with this urgency. And that, of course, leads to what I want to call outrage, frankly, outrage, because it is outrageous that one hurricane in Mozambique leaves 900,000 children without knowing where their parents are or even if they're alive. One hurricane in Mozambique. It is outrageous that our lack of action has caused 1.5 million youngsters to go out on the streets and demonstrate against us adults, irresponsible adults, because we have not done our homework. They're doing their homework in school, but we are not. It is outrageous that last year the world went up 1.7% of greenhouse gas emissions, despite the fact that we know that we should not be going up, but down. We pressed the wrong button on the elevator, okay? We're supposed to be going down, not up. It is outrageous that the International Energy Agency does not put out a scenario for 1.5 degrees. It is outrageous that we're still investing in fossil fuels. A lot of it, by the way, coming out of the City of London, hence a huge responsibility on Britain. And it is outrageous that we're doing nothing responsible on land use. So should we feel anger? Should we feel outrage? Yes, definitely. And we should not shy away from that. And I count on you to remind everyone of how irresponsible we're being and what the urgency is. And then, period, new paragraph. We're seeing a lot of progress. And that progress has to be put in equal standing with the outrage. Equal standing, not one above the other, but in equal standing. We're seeing a lot of progress. Just to take the UK, because I used to live in this wonderful country, and most of you do. Did you know that I say I as though I were a Brit, we used to employ more than 1 million people in the coal industry in the UK. Do you know how many are employed in the coal industry today? Guess? 500? How cool is that? How cool is that? We've gone from more than 1 million to 500 today. We've gone from 1970, more or less, in the 70s. Britain used to produce 50% of the energy from coal. How much do you think is produced now by coal? 4%. How cool is that, okay? So it's doable, folks. It is totally doable, and there is a commitment to complete phase out by 2020. On renewable energy, Britain is now at 30%, and with a commitment to go to 75% by 2030. Can it be more? Yes, it can be more. But are we on a good track? Yes. The current commitment in the UK is to go to 80% reductions by 2050, and I am very happy that it's almost the 2nd of May, and that the Committee on Climate Change, I hope, is going to advise the government that they can go to zero net by 2050, because that is what Britain has to do. That is what, frankly, what everyone has to do. If a country the size of mine, a tiny little Costa Rica, can say, we're going to net zero by 2050, you think Britain cannot do it? Come on. Come on. We all have to do it, no excuse. Now, globally, also actually quite a lot of progress, okay? Quite a bit of progress. We have actually gone from 2 to 3% of renewable energy on the complete energy, global energy grid to 23% and are on track to get to 50% by 2030. Good news and progress. Good news and progress that today, solar energy produced in India is much cheaper than any coal-produced energy, and hence India is moving over to solar. Goodbye coal in India. It is good news that China is closing coal plants because they like to breathe, and they would prefer not to see the air that they're breathing. And so they are closing coal plants. It is good news that we have a revolution in the transport industry with electric vehicles. But all of that progress needs to be celebrated and differentiated from optimism. And let me explain what I mean. We're not here to only admire the problem, which we already saw. We're also not here just to admire the progress that we have had. We're actually here with a task at hand. That is the task still at hand. And I think that we can take the outrage that we all feel, the pain, the anger, the outrage from the kids, we can forge it with the progress that we have, and that should actually be the center of our optimism. Because for me, optimism is not the result of something that you have achieved. It is a choice that we make in front of a challenge. If I have a challenge, whether that is personal or global and anything in between, I have to decide, how do I go at it? Have you ever known anyone who says, I'm going to make a film in the next 4 years, but actually I don't think I can do it? Well, how many films come out of that process, right? So we have a task at hand, and we have to decide that we step out into our conviction that we have everything it takes. Because the fact is, we have all the technology, almost all the technology. We certainly have the capital. We know what the policies are. The only thing that we need to change is our mindset. We need to actually cultivate the can-do attitude, because we can do. We can do, as has been demonstrated by the little progress pieces. So the fun thing about that is that as we do that, we're not leaving all of the other SDGs aside. We're creating more livable cities. We're having better transport. We're having better health. We're having much better education for women. We are increasing our energy independence. We're actually bringing in all of the other sustainability issues together with this, because they all have to be achieved together. So where does that actually leave BAFTA? Well, I think that leaves you, I hope, with the conclusion that this is not a story of sacrifice. This is not a story of duty. This is a story of opportunity. This is a story of well-being. This is a story of being able to click many of the to-dos together and actually exponentialize them, one and the other. You, more than anyone else, more than any other industry, you have the power to use human stories to create the better world that we need to get to. You have the power to unleash imagination, to detonate ingenuity, and to use the powerful stories that are already there to create more stories so that they can actually nurture themselves into the new world that all of us want, and certainly that the next generation deserves. We have to be very, very careful, because frankly, we are on the brink of either going into despair and paralysis or into optimism. And you know which road we have to take. So the task at hand, tonight and every day of your next waking hour, is to create and nurture a culture of climate optimism, stubborn climate optimism, because we will have many barriers. So what? That cannot stop us. We have to then move forward, underneath, over, to the left, to the right, wherever. It has to be a stubborn optimism, because it has to be absolutely relentless. And it has to be able to change those examples of progress that we now have into being standardized, those isolated events into being the norm. That is the task at hand. And so, of course, you will ask, so why now? Well, I have 3 reasons why now. First, because I believe that outrage and progress are now ripe enough to be forged together into a very creative, productive optimism that can move us forward. Secondly, because we're the adults at the table. We are the adults at the table. This is not the responsibility of the next generation, much as they're out on the streets to remind us. We are the adults at the table. This is on our shoulders. And finally, because this is our last opportunity to do so. If we don't do that, the first folding of half over the next 10 years, folks, we are fried. We are fried, literally fried. So this is it. This is it. You came to a birthday party, celebrate, and take your task with us. Finally, I want to invite you to write a different story of the Anthropocene. Sir David Attenborough was in Davos in January and spoke as movingly as he always does. And he said he was born in the Holocene, which was the previous geological age, and he's now living in the Anthropocene, which is the geological age in which we humans have taken over power over everything. So I was very jealous, because I want to do that too. So I've researched, and actually the 1950s happened to be the change in the era. So all of you who were born in the 50s or before can actually say you are living or you have lived in 2 geological eras. But here is the difference. Sir David said, the Garden of Eden is no more. And I think you all understand what he meant. the Garden of Eden is no more. I accept that painfully. And I posit that therefore, we have the responsibility to create the garden of intention. Because it is only with intention and purpose that we're actually going to create the better world. So how you will use your stories and the stories that are created by so many people outside of this room to create the garden of intention is up to you. I hand over the pen and the camera to your magical powers. Thank you.